One ordinary evening, a family of 5 simply disappeared. No screams. No struggle. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. The family's phones had been left behind. Their passports were still inside a bedroom drawer. Their car remained parked in the driveway. It looked impossible. How could an entire family vanish without taking a single essential item? At first, investigators believed they had left voluntarily. But that theory collapsed within hours. There were no bank transactions. No border crossings. No security footage showing them leaving. No ransom demands. No bodies. It was as if the family had been erased from existence. Then detectives noticed something that everyone else had overlooked. One bedroom door had been carefully locked from the inside. After forcing it open, they discovered something that made even experienced investigators fall silent. A single digital camera rested on the floor. Inside the camera were hundreds of ordinary family photographs, birthdays, vacations, school events, smiling faces. But the final photograph was unlike any of the others. It had been taken only minutes before the disappearance. The image showed the entire family standing inside their own living room. All 5 were looking directly at the camera. None of them were smiling. Behind them, reflected in the large hallway mirror, stood the faint outline of someone else. Someone who was not supposed to be there. No member of the family ever reported having a guest that evening. No fingerprints belonging to another person were found anywhere in the house. And no one has ever been able to identify the figure in that reflection. That photograph would become one of the most debated pieces of evidence in modern criminal history. Was it an intruder? A trick of the light? Or the final image of someone responsible for making an entire family disappear forever? To understand what happened that night, investigators first had to understand the people who vanished. The Harper family lived in the quiet suburban town of Ashbrook, a peaceful community where neighbors rarely locked their doors and children still rode bicycles until sunset. Michael Harper was 44 years old and worked as a civil engineer. Friends described him as patient, intelligent, and dependable. He enjoyed restoring old furniture in his garage during weekends and rarely missed one of his children's school events. His wife, Laura, taught literature at the local high school. She had a warm personality and was known for remembering everyone's birthdays. Students often said she had changed their lives simply by encouraging them to believe in themselves. Together they had 3 children. 17-year-old Emma dreamed of becoming a journalist. Curious by nature, she carried a notebook almost everywhere she went, filling it with observations and story ideas. 14-year-old Noah loved astronomy. His bedroom ceiling was covered with glow-in-the-dark stars, and nearly every clear night he pointed his telescope toward the sky. The youngest, 8-year-old Lily, filled the house with laughter. She loved drawing imaginary creatures and taping her colorful artwork to every available wall. To everyone around them, they looked like the perfect family. Their weekends were predictable. Saturday mornings meant pancakes. Afternoons were usually spent hiking or visiting grandparents. Sunday evenings always ended with family movie night. Neighbors often joked that the Harpers belonged in a television commercial because they always seemed happy together. But appearances can be dangerously misleading. Months before the disappearance, subtle changes had begun to emerge. They were so small that no one considered them important. Not at first. Michael started arriving home later than usual. Whenever Laura asked about work, he simply smiled and said there was a large construction project keeping everyone busy. His explanation sounded reasonable. Until detectives later discovered something impossible. There was no such project. Company records proved Michael had been leaving the office at exactly 5 every evening. Where had he been going? That question would haunt investigators for years. Laura also seemed distracted. Several close friends remembered her canceling lunches and social gatherings, saying she needed more time at home. One friend later recalled asking whether everything was all right. Laura hesitated before answering. "We're just dealing with something complicated." She never explained what she meant. Emma noticed changes as well. During dinner one evening she casually asked why her father had started locking his home office every night. Michael immediately changed the subject. Laura remained unusually quiet. The conversation ended almost as quickly as it had begun. No one mentioned it again. Weeks later, Noah told a classmate about a strange man parked across the street. According to him, the same dark-colored sedan appeared several evenings each week. Sometimes the driver simply watched the house. Other times the car disappeared before anyone could approach. His parents dismissed it. It probably belongs to one of the neighbors. But Noah wasn't convinced. He even wrote down part of the license plate in one of his astronomy notebooks. At the time, it seemed like something only an imaginative teenager would do. Months later, detectives would discover that notebook. It would become one of the most valuable pieces of evidence in the investigation. The family dog, Cooper, also began behaving strangely. Normally friendly with everyone, he suddenly refused to enter the garage after dark. Several times Michael was seen standing outside alone, trying unsuccessfully to persuade the frightened dog to come inside. Neighbors laughed about it. No one imagined the behavior might actually mean something. Then there were the phone calls. Laura received them almost every evening around the same time. Whenever she answered, nobody spoke. The calls lasted only a few seconds before disconnecting. Police later confirmed the numbers could not be traced because they had been routed through multiple prepaid phones. Someone had gone to considerable effort to remain anonymous. Still, life appeared to continue normally. Birthdays were celebrated. School concerts were attended. Family photographs continued filling social media. The smiles looked genuine. Yet investigators would later describe those final months as a carefully maintained illusion. Behind the scenes, tension had quietly begun growing inside the Harper home. Only one person outside the family seemed to notice. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, an elderly neighbor who lived directly across the street. She often sat on her front porch in the evenings, reading books while watching neighborhood life unfold. One afternoon she noticed Michael standing in the driveway speaking to an unfamiliar man wearing a dark coat. The conversation appeared unusually serious. Neither man shook hands. Neither smiled. After less than 2 minutes, the stranger walked away without looking back. When detectives later showed Evelyn dozens of photographs, she couldn't identify him. "I've never seen him before," she said. "But I remember his eyes." "What about them?" an investigator asked. She paused for several seconds. "He looked like he already knew something terrible was going to happen." At the time, her statement sounded dramatic. Later, detectives would revisit it again and again. Because the mysterious visitor had never appeared on any security camera entering or leaving the neighborhood. Almost as if he had appeared and vanished. The final week before the family's disappearance seemed unusually peaceful. Michael took 2 unexpected vacation days from work. Laura baked Lily's favorite chocolate cake even though it wasn't anyone's birthday. Emma spent hours organizing old family photographs. Noah cleaned his telescope for an upcoming meteor shower. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing suggested that these ordinary moments would soon become the final memories anyone would ever have of the Harper family. But on the morning before they disappeared, something happened that investigators wouldn't learn about until much later. It seemed insignificant. Just a brief conversation. A simple sentence spoken in passing. Yet it would eventually change the entire direction of the investigation. And what Michael Harper said that morning would leave detectives asking one terrifying question that no one could answer. Michael Harper left his house just after 7 that morning, coffee in one hand and his briefcase in the other. Before getting into his car, he looked up and down the quiet street as if he were expecting someone. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, who was watering flowers across the road, waved at him. Michael smiled politely, but his expression quickly faded. Instead of driving away immediately, he remained seated in his car for nearly 2 minutes, staring into the rearview mirror. Then he drove off. At the time, nothing about it seemed unusual. Only after the family's disappearance would investigators review nearby security footage and notice those 2 silent minutes. What was Michael waiting for? Or perhaps, who was he watching? Later that afternoon, Michael stopped at a neighborhood grocery store. The cashier remembered him clearly because he bought unusually large quantities of food, bread, milk, fruit, canned soup, bottled water, and enough supplies to last at least 2 weeks. It was odd. The Harper family usually shopped every 3 or 4 days. When the cashier jokingly asked if they were preparing for a storm, Michael forced a smile. "You never know what's coming." Those words stayed with her long after he vanished. Investigators later confirmed there were no weather warnings, no emergency alerts, and no reason for such a purchase. It was as if Michael expected something else entirely. Around the same time, Laura finished teaching her final class before summer break. Several students later remembered that she seemed distracted. Normally she stayed after class to answer questions. That afternoon, she packed her books unusually quickly. As she reached the classroom door, one student called after her. "See you next semester, Mrs. Harper." Laura stopped. She smiled gently. "I hope so." The classroom fell silent. At first, everyone assumed she meant she hoped to return after the holidays. Weeks later, those 3 words would take on a far darker meaning. Emma spent the afternoon at the town library researching universities. Security cameras showed her laughing with the librarian before checking out 2 journalism books. She promised to return them the following week. The books were never returned. Noah visited a local electronics shop with his father after school. According to the store owner, Michael bought a new memory card for Noah's telescope camera. It was an ordinary purchase. Yet detectives later found the empty package inside the house. The memory card itself had vanished. Whatever had been stored on it disappeared along with the family. Lily attended her weekly art class. Her teacher remembered her proudly showing a drawing she had finished earlier that morning. It showed 5 people standing in front of their house. Above them, she had drawn an enormous black bird with unusually large wings. When her teacher asked what it was, Lily answered quietly, "It keeps coming back." Children often imagine strange things. Nobody thought much of it. But when police later searched Lily's bedroom, they found more than 20 similar drawings hidden beneath her bed. Every one of them showed the same dark figure watching the family from a distance. Some pictures placed it outside the kitchen window. Others showed it standing near the garage. In the final drawing, it was inside the house. The children's psychologist consulted during the investigation couldn't determine whether the drawings reflected imagination, nightmares, or something Lily had actually seen. That uncertainty only deepened the mystery. As evening approached, neighbors noticed the Harpers preparing what appeared to be an ordinary family dinner. The smell of grilled chicken drifted across the street. Music played softly through an open kitchen window. Laura laughed at something Michael said. Emma helped set the table. Noah carried drinks into the dining room. Lily chased Cooper through the backyard. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked normal. If someone had walked past the house at that moment, they would have seen nothing that hinted this would be the last evening anyone would ever see the family together. At 6:42 p.m., Laura sent her sister a photograph. It showed everyone gathered around the dinner table. Michael smiled while pretending to steal food from Lily's plate. Emma rolled her eyes dramatically. Noah laughed. Lily covered her face with both hands. The message beneath the picture read, "Perfect family chaos." Her sister replied with a laughing emoji. Laura never opened the message. At 7:15 p.m., Emma posted a short video online. The family dog was barking excitedly at something outside the living room window. The video lasted only 12 seconds. Friends found it amusing. Investigators, however, noticed something everyone else had missed. Just before the recording ended, Emma briefly pointed the camera toward the driveway. A dark sedan sat parked across the street. Its headlights were off. The engine appeared to be running. When detectives enlarged the footage, the image became too blurry to identify either the driver or the license plate. But one thing was clear. No neighbor recognized the vehicle. At 8:03 p.m., Noah used his telescope in the backyard. According to data recovered from his astronomy app, he captured several photographs of the night sky. Most contained stars and distant planets. The final image, however, wasn't pointed toward the sky. It faced the edge of the family's property. Standing near a line of trees was a tall shadow. Too dark to identify. Too far away to recognize. Investigators spent months enhancing the image. The result revealed almost nothing. Only the vague outline of what appeared to be a person watching the house. Whoever it was, they were standing perfectly still. At 8:37 p.m., a neighbor heard Cooper barking uncontrollably. No one heard another sound. No shouting. No crash. No gunshots. Only silence. Exactly 40 minutes later, Michael's phone connected to the home's Wi-Fi for the final time. Then every digital device inside the house went offline within less than 30 seconds. Phones, tablets, laptop computers, even the smart television. Investigators later described it as one of the strangest digital timelines they had ever examined. It looked almost coordinated, as though someone had intentionally disconnected everything at once. But there was no evidence of hacking. No damaged wiring. No power outage. Just silence. At 9:31 p.m., delivery driver passed the Harper home. His dashboard camera later became crucial evidence. The living room lights were on. The television flickered through the front window. Nothing unusual. Except for one detail. As his vehicle passed, a figure briefly appeared behind the living room curtains. The driver assumed it was one of the family. Months later, investigators slowed the footage frame by frame. The figure seemed unusually tall. Its shoulders appeared far broader than Michael's. And within a second, it disappeared from the window. The identity of that person has never been confirmed. The final confirmed activity occurred at 9:47 p.m. Laura's smartwatch automatically recorded an elevated heart rate lasting approximately 48 seconds. Then the data stopped completely. Not because the battery died. The watch itself was later found inside the master bedroom, still fully charged. No explanation has ever been found for why the recording suddenly ended. After that, nothing. No messages. No phone calls. No internet activity. No movement detected by neighboring security cameras. It was as though time itself had frozen inside the Harper house. The next morning, the neighborhood slowly came to life. Children waited for school buses. Cars left for work. Joggers followed their usual routes. The Harper home remained unusually quiet. The curtains stayed closed. The family car never moved. Neighbors assumed they had simply decided to sleep in. But by the afternoon, concern began to grow. Michael failed to attend an important engineering meeting without calling. Laura didn't answer repeated calls from the school principal. Emma missed an interview she had spent weeks preparing for. Noah failed to attend the school's astronomy competition. Even Lily's art teacher received no message explaining her absence. One missed appointment might have meant nothing. 5 unexplained absences felt impossible. By early evening, Laura's sister could no longer ignore the uneasy feeling in her stomach. She drove directly to the Harper house. She expected to find everyone inside. Instead, what she discovered would trigger one of the largest missing family investigations the town had ever seen. And the first thing she noticed before even reaching the front door would become one of the most chilling details in the entire case. Laura's sister, Rebecca Collins, pulled into the driveway just after 6:20 p.m.
Michael?
The street looked exactly as it always had. Children were riding bicycles. A lawnmower hummed somewhere in the distance. Birds chirped from the tall oak trees lining the neighborhood. Everything felt normal. Everything except the Harper house. Before Rebecca even stepped out of her car, she noticed something that immediately made her uneasy. The front door was slightly open. Only a few inches. Just enough for the evening breeze to gently move it back and forth. That wasn't like Michael. He was meticulous about locking every door before going to bed or leaving the house. Rebecca walked up the driveway, calling Laura's name. No answer. She knocked once. Then again, louder. Silence. After pushing the door open, she stepped inside. Laura? Still nothing. The house was strangely quiet. Not the peaceful silence of an empty home. It felt unnatural. As if the house itself was holding its breath. The television was still on. A news channel played quietly in the living room. No one was watching it. In the kitchen, 5 dinner plates remained on the table. Half-eaten food sat exactly where it had been left. One drinking glass had tipped over, spilling water across the table and onto the floor. The water had already dried. Whatever had interrupted dinner had happened many hours earlier. Rebecca slowly walked deeper into the house. The smell of cooked food still lingered in the air. A ceiling fan continued spinning above the dining room. Nothing looked damaged. No broken furniture. No shattered windows. No blood. No obvious signs of violence. She checked every bedroom. Empty. The bathrooms. Empty. The backyard. Empty. Even Cooper, the family dog, was gone. That frightened her more than anything. Michael would never have left without Cooper. Hands shaking, Rebecca dialed emergency services. Within minutes, patrol officers arrived. At first, they believed it might simply be a family emergency. Perhaps someone had rushed to the hospital. Perhaps they had left suddenly. Those possibilities disappeared almost immediately. Every member of the Harper family's wallet was still inside the house. Their passports remained neatly stored inside a bedroom drawer. Laura's handbag rested on a chair near the entrance. Michael's car keys hung from the familiar hook beside the kitchen door. Emma's backpack still contained homework due the next morning. Noah's favorite sneakers sat beside the staircase. Lily's stuffed rabbit lay on her bed. Nothing suggested the family had planned to leave. One officer quietly said, "If they walked out voluntarily, where are their shoes?" It was a simple observation. Yet no one could answer it. Several pairs of outdoor shoes were still lined up neatly by the entrance. Investigators later concluded that if the family had left together, they had likely done so wearing indoor clothing. That made no sense. Detectives immediately secured the property. Crime scene investigators arrived shortly afterward. Forensic teams photographed every room exactly as they found it. Every plate. Every chair. Every fingerprint. Every tiny detail. At first glance, the evidence seemed almost disappointingly ordinary. Fingerprints belonged almost entirely to family members. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of a fight. No stolen valuables. Televisions. Jewelry. Cash. Laptop computers. Everything remained untouched. One detective later admitted, "It felt less like investigating a crime scene, and more like walking into someone's life that had suddenly paused." The kitchen clock had stopped at 9:51 p.m. Not because it was broken. Its battery had simply died. It seemed meaningless. Until investigators realized something unusual. Every electronic clock inside the house displayed different times. Only the kitchen clock had stopped. Exactly 4 minutes after Laura's smartwatch recorded its final heartbeat. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps not. As investigators continued searching the house, one officer noticed something strange in the hallway. A family portrait hung slightly crooked. It wasn't much. Barely noticeable. But Michael was known for keeping everything perfectly organized. The detective straightened the frame. It refused to stay level. Curious, he removed it from the wall. Behind the photograph was a small hole, no larger than a coin. Inside the wall cavity, investigators discovered an old envelope. It contained several newspaper clippings. Every article described families who had mysteriously disappeared over the past 30 years. None of the disappearances had ever been solved. There were handwritten notes beside many of the articles. Dates. Question marks. Locations connected by drawn lines. Someone had been studying these cases. But who? Michael? Laura? Or someone else entirely? The discovery transformed the investigation overnight. Detectives were no longer looking at an isolated disappearance. They began wondering whether the Harper family had somehow become connected to something much larger. While crime scene technicians searched upstairs, another investigator entered Michael's locked home office. Rebecca had mentioned that Michael recently kept the room locked almost every evening. The lock showed no damage. Inside, everything appeared unusually tidy. Too tidy. Every document was perfectly stacked. Every pen aligned. Every bookshelf spotless. Experienced detectives immediately recognized the warning sign. Rooms cleaned this carefully often meant someone was trying to hide something. After several hours of searching, they found a loose floorboard beneath Michael's desk. Hidden underneath was a small metal box. Inside were 3 items. A flash drive. A handwritten notebook. And a single key with no label. The notebook contained mostly numbers. Coordinates. Dates. Times. None appeared random. Several pages had been torn out. The flash drive was encrypted. Despite assistance from cybercrime specialists, investigators couldn't access its contents. Not that week. Not that month. It would take nearly 8 months before someone finally managed to open it. And what they found inside would completely change the investigation. For now, however, the flash drive remained a mystery. The unidentified key proved equally frustrating. It matched no lock inside the Harper home. No safety deposit box under Michael's name. No storage unit. Nothing. It was as though it belonged somewhere investigators hadn't yet discovered. Meanwhile, forensic specialists examined the dining table more closely. 5 plates. 5 glasses. 5 sets of fingerprints. Everything matched the family. Except for one small detail. On Michael's plate rested a 6th drinking glass. It had been placed slightly farther away from the others. Almost as if another person had briefly joined them. Yet the glass contained no usable fingerprints. Not even Michael's. It had been wiped perfectly clean. Whoever handled it knew exactly what they were doing. Detectives could no longer dismiss the possibility that someone else had been inside the house that evening. Then another strange discovery emerged. A neighbor's security camera overlooked part of the Harper driveway. Investigators hoped it would finally reveal who had entered or left the property. Instead, it created an even bigger mystery. The recording showed Michael arriving home. Laura arriving shortly afterward. Emma. Noah. Lily. All entering the house before dinner. But from that point onward, no one was seen leaving. Not a single family member. Not on foot. Not by car. Not through the backyard. Nothing. Yet they were undeniably gone. One detective watched the footage more than 50 times. His conclusion stunned everyone. It's almost like they disappeared without ever crossing the property line. News of the case spread rapidly. Within 48 hours, television stations across the country began covering the mystery. Reporters gathered outside the Harper home day and night. Helicopters flew overhead. Social media exploded with theories. Some believed the family had entered witness protection. Others claimed organized criminals were involved. Some insisted it had to be a murder. But where were the bodies? Search teams combed nearby forests. Divers searched lakes and rivers. Drones scanned abandoned buildings. Tracking dogs followed the family sent to the end of the driveway. And then stopped. Not faded. Stopped. As though the trail had simply vanished into thin air. Even the experienced handlers admitted they had never seen anything quite like it. Then, 3 days after the investigation began, detectives received an anonymous phone call. The caller spoke only one sentence. They weren't the first family. Before investigators could trace the line, the caller hung up. That chilling message sent shockwaves through the entire task force. Because hidden inside Michael's wall had been newspaper clippings about other missing families. Could those disappearances somehow be connected? Or was someone deliberately trying to mislead the investigation? Detectives had no way of knowing. But what they would uncover next, inside one forgotten storage unit on the outskirts of town, would introduce a secret that Michael Harper had hidden from everyone, including his own family. And from that moment on, the case would become far darker than anyone had imagined. 3 days after the anonymous phone call, investigators shifted their attention away from the Harper home and began digging into every part of Michael Harper's life. They searched his workplace, interviewed his colleagues, reviewed years of financial records, examined thousands of emails. At first, nothing appeared suspicious. Michael had no criminal history, no gambling debts, no known enemies, no unexplained wealth. He seemed exactly what everyone believed him to be, a hard-working engineer devoted to his family. But experienced detectives knew that the most carefully hidden secrets rarely appeared on the surface. One investigator decided to revisit Michael's bank records one more time. This time, instead of looking for large transactions, he focused on small recurring payments. That decision changed everything. Every month, for nearly 6 years, Michael had paid a modest storage rental fee using an account almost no one knew existed. The payments were so small they had blended into ordinary household expenses. No one had noticed them before. Not even Laura. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of Ashbrook, surrounded by abandoned warehouses and overgrown fields. It was quiet. Almost forgotten. When detectives arrived with a search warrant, the facility manager immediately recognized Michael's photograph. "Nice guy," he said. "Always came alone." "How often?" "Maybe once every month." "What did he keep inside?" The manager shook his head. "I never asked." The storage unit was located at the far end of a narrow corridor. Unit 214. The same mysterious key recovered from Michael's office unlocked it perfectly. As the metal door slowly rolled upward, investigators expected to find old furniture or personal belongings. Instead, they stood frozen. The unit was almost completely empty. Only 3 objects sat inside. An old wooden desk, a locked filing cabinet, and a wall covered with maps. Hundreds of colored pins connected towns across the country. Red strings linked dozens of locations together. Many were places where entire families had disappeared over the past 3 decades. The same cases Michael had hidden behind the family portrait. But now there were far more. Nearly 40. Every known unsolved family disappearance had been marked. Detectives exchanged confused looks. Why would an ordinary engineer spend years documenting these cases? The answer wasn't immediately obvious. Inside the desk, they found notebooks dating back almost 10 years. Each contained detailed observations, weather conditions, police timelines, witness statements clipped from newspapers, maps, personal theories. It resembled the work of someone conducting a long-term investigation. Not a criminal planning crimes. A researcher searching for answers. One page had a sentence circled repeatedly. They always disappear together. Another read, "The pattern isn't random." Then investigators reached the final notebook. Its last written entry had been made only 2 days before the Harper family vanished. It contained just one sentence. "I think they're watching us now." No explanation followed. No names. Nothing. Just those 7 chilling words. For the first time, detectives wondered whether Michael had feared something long before his disappearance. Or someone. The locked filing cabinet proved even more interesting. Inside were dozens of photographs. Not of crime scenes. Of strangers. Families eating dinner. Children playing in parks. Parents walking to school with their kids. Each photograph had dates written on the back. Some families were eventually identified. Several had disappeared years earlier. Others were still alive. Investigators immediately contacted those families. Most dismissed the photographs as a strange coincidence. One family, however, reacted differently. The Bennett family from another state agreed to speak with detectives. When shown the photograph, Mrs. Bennett turned pale. She recognized the man who had taken it. She had seen him parked outside their house several times during the previous month. She assumed he was a private investigator. She had never reported it. Her husband quietly added something that sent chills through the interview room. "We disappeared 6 months later." Detectives stared at him. "What do you mean, disappeared?" He leaned forward. "We didn't tell the police." Years earlier, the Bennett family had awakened to discover someone had entered their home during the night. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing damaged. But every family photograph inside the house had disappeared. The incident terrified them so deeply they sold their home and changed cities without informing anyone except close relatives. Officially, they had never been listed as missing. But for several months, to everyone who knew them, they had simply vanished. The similarity disturbed investigators. Could Michael have been trying to warn these families? Or had someone been watching them all? As detectives processed the evidence from the storage unit, another breakthrough arrived. Cybercrime experts finally succeeded in partially unlocking the encrypted flash drive. The files inside were unexpected. There were hundreds of surveillance videos. But not of strangers. They were recordings from hidden cameras Michael had secretly installed around his own property. The oldest video dated back almost 4 years. Most showed nothing unusual. Rainstorms. Ordinary life. Then, one recording stopped everyone in the room. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m., nearly 11 months before the disappearance. The backyard appeared empty. For almost 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then a figure slowly emerged from the darkness beyond the fence. Its face remained hidden beneath a hood. The person didn't approach the house. Didn't knock. Didn't attempt to enter. Instead, they simply stood there, watching, completely motionless, for 17 minutes. Then they walked back into the darkness. Investigators immediately searched for footprints. Nothing had been preserved. Over the following weeks, they found similar appearances on 6 separate nights. Always the same time. Always silent. Always watching. The figure never crossed the property line. Never spoke. Never revealed their face. Who were they? No one knew. The footage was released privately to behavioral analysts. Most believed it showed deliberate psychological intimidation. Someone wanted the Harper family to know they were being watched. But why? Then investigators noticed something else. In every recording, Cooper, the family dog, reacted before the figure became visible. He would suddenly wake, growl, stand perfectly still. Only seconds later would the mysterious person appear at the edge of the property. It was almost as though the dog sensed them long before the cameras did. The final surveillance recording came from the night of the disappearance. At exactly 8:51 p.m., the camera overlooking the backyard captured movement near the trees. Not one figure. 3. All standing several meters apart. Completely still. Watching the house. 21 seconds later. Every camera feed went black simultaneously. No electrical surge. No equipment failure. Just instant darkness. When technicians later examined the hard drives, they discovered something impossible. The files hadn't been corrupted. They had been cleanly deleted. Only one short clip remained. 27 silent seconds. In the final frame, someone appeared to be standing just outside the back door, facing the house, waiting. Investigators enlarged the image repeatedly. The face remained impossible to identify. But one detail stood out. The person appeared to be wearing black leather gloves. The same type of gloves capable of leaving no fingerprints behind. Suddenly, the spotless sixth drinking glass on the dining table no longer seemed like an accident. Someone may have been inside that house. Someone who knew exactly how to leave no trace. And just when detectives believed the investigation couldn't become any stranger, the laboratory called with the results from an overlooked piece of evidence recovered during the first search of the Harper home. A single strand of hair. It belonged to no member of the Harper family. And the DNA profile did not match anyone in any national criminal database. The mystery had just entered an entirely new and terrifying chapter. The unidentified strand of hair became the investigation's newest obsession. For months, forensic scientists tested it again and again, convinced that the first result had to be a mistake. It wasn't. The DNA profile belonged to someone who had never been arrested, never served in the military, never submitted a commercial genealogy sample, and had never appeared in any government database. To investigators, the person was effectively invisible. That realization changed the entire investigation. Until then, detectives had assumed they were searching for someone who had slipped through the cracks. Now they considered a far more disturbing possibility. Perhaps whoever had entered the Harper home had planned for years to leave behind no identifiable trace. The case expanded into one of the largest investigations in the country's history. More than 100 detectives were assigned to it. Behavioral analysts, digital forensic experts, financial investigators, even retired homicide detectives volunteered their time. Every possible lead was pursued. Thousands of interviews were conducted. Millions of phone records were examined. Nothing explained how an entire family could disappear from a locked house without leaving behind a crime scene. Then, nearly 5 months after the disappearance, another unexpected clue arrived. A truck driver contacted police after seeing national news coverage of the case. At first, investigators assumed it would be another false lead. Instead, his statement immediately caught their attention. He claimed that on the night the Harper family vanished, he had stopped at a roadside gas station nearly 60 miles outside Ashbrook. While filling his truck, he noticed a dark SUV parked near the edge of the lot. 3 men stood beside it. Their faces were hidden beneath baseball caps. What caught his attention wasn't the men. It was the little girl sitting inside the vehicle. She looked frightened. She pressed one small hand against the rear window as if trying to get someone's attention. The truck driver smiled and waved. She didn't wave back. Instead, she slowly placed one finger across her lips. A silent gesture. As if she were being told not to speak. The image haunted him for months. When he later saw Lily Harper's photograph on television, he immediately called investigators. Police rushed to obtain security footage from the gas station. Unfortunately, there was a problem. The recordings had been automatically deleted after 90 days. The only remaining evidence was a fuel receipt. The SUV had paid in cash. No license plate information existed. No useful fingerprints were recovered from the fuel pump. Another promising lead. Gone. Still, detectives couldn't ignore the possibility that Lily had survived beyond the night of the disappearance. Search teams widened their investigation. Hotels. Highways. Private cabins. Abandoned farms. Every location within 200 miles was re-examined. Nothing. Weeks later, another witness emerged. An elderly woman living alone in a rural village remembered seeing a family matching the Harper's description walking through nearby woods shortly after sunrise on the morning after they vanished. At first, detectives were encouraged. Until she added one unsettling detail. They weren't walking normally. "What do you mean?" an investigator asked. She hesitated. It looked like they were following someone. Were they tied up? No. Were they injured? No. So why didn't they leave? The old woman looked down at her hands. Because none of them ever looked behind them. Investigators searched the forest for nearly 2 weeks. Cadaver dogs. Mounted officers. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging. Ground-penetrating radar. Nothing. Not one footprint. Not one item of clothing. Not one trace of the Harper family. The witness remained convinced she had seen them. Police could neither confirm nor disprove her story. Then came another shocking development. During a detailed review of Emma Harper's laptop, digital analysts recovered fragments of deleted journal entries. Most described ordinary teenage life. School. Friends. College dreams. But the final entries were different. One, written only 3 weeks before the disappearance, read, "Dad keeps checking the windows every night. He thinks we don't notice." Another entry stated, "Mom cried after another phone call today. She told Dad, we can't keep pretending." The final recovered note contained only one sentence. "If something happens to us, it wasn't an accident." Detectives immediately compared those words with Michael's notebooks. Both parents had clearly been hiding something. The question was no longer whether they were afraid. The question was, afraid of whom? Then investigators uncovered Michael's work computer. One deleted email, restored by forensic specialists, had never been sent. It was addressed to a journalist who specialized in organized crime. The subject line read, "I finally found the connection." The email ended abruptly after only a few paragraphs. It mentioned several missing families, repeated surveillance, anonymous threats, and one chilling sentence. "They don't just make people disappear. They erase every reason anyone would look for them." The draft had never been completed. There was no indication that the journalist ever received it. Had Michael been interrupted? Or had he decided sending it would place his family in even greater danger? Behavioral experts now believed Michael had spent years quietly investigating something. Not officially. Not professionally. Privately. Somewhere along the way, someone may have realized he was getting too close. As media attention intensified, conspiracy theories spread rapidly across. Some claimed the family had entered a secret government witness protection program. Others insisted they had uncovered an international trafficking network. Police dismissed speculation publicly. Detectives admitted they had no explanation that fit all the evidence. Leads became less frequent. Public attention faded. A maintenance worker repairing an abandoned railway signal box nearly 100 miles from Ashbrook discovered a small waterproof container hidden beneath loose concrete. The film had survived. When developed, investigators found 20 roads, forests. It showed Mike. He was standing alone inside what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. He wasn't visibly injured. He looked exhausted. And directly behind him stood two unidentified figures. The photograph had no date, no location, no fingerprints, no explanation. Experts analyzed every inch of the image. Dust particles, building materials, shadows, weather conditions. Nothing revealed where it had been taken. The disposable camera itself had been manufactured years earlier and sold in thousands of stores across the country. It couldn't be traced. Investigators publicly released only part of the image. They deliberately cropped out the two shadowy figures. They feared false confessions if the full photograph became public. But someone leaked it online. Within hours, millions had seen it. Theories exploded once again. Who were the figures? Were they kidnappers? Accomplices? Or something else entirely? Then, just as investigators were trying to identify the warehouse, they received another anonymous message. Unlike the previous phone call, this one arrived as a handwritten letter. There was no return address. No fingerprints. Only 7 words written in black ink. Stop looking, or another family disappears. The threat was impossible to ignore. For the first time, detectives seriously considered that whoever had taken the Harpers might still be watching the investigation itself. Some officers requested protection for their own families. Others quietly removed personal information from public records. Fear had spread beyond the case. It had become personal. And just when investigators believed they had uncovered every secret Michael Harper had been hiding, a retired detective reviewing evidence from another unsolved disappearance made a phone call that would completely transform the investigation. He claimed he had seen one specific object before. Not in the Harper case, but in a file nearly 28 years old. The same unusual symbol. The same pattern. The same chilling signature. If he was right, the Harper family had not been chosen at random. They had become part of something that had been happening for decades. Something far larger. And far more terrifying than anyone had ever imagined. The retired detective arrived at the task force headquarters carrying a faded cardboard archive box that had not been opened in more than 20 years. Dust covered the lid. The case file inside had long been forgotten. Most of the officers in the room had never even heard of it. The detective carefully spread several photographs across the conference table. "Look closely," he said. At first, they appeared unrelated. Different cities. Different years. Different families. But after several minutes, investigators noticed the pattern. In every case, one small object appeared somewhere in the photographs. Sometimes it was carved into a wooden fence. Sometimes drawn on the back of a road sign. Once it had been scratched into the frame of a bedroom window. It was always the same strange symbol. A circle with 3 lines crossing through its center. The exact same symbol that investigators had recently discovered in the corner of Michael Harper's notebook. For years, no one had paid attention to it. Now it suddenly seemed impossible to ignore. The retired detective explained that he had investigated an entire family's disappearance nearly 28 years earlier. Like the Harpers, they vanished without taking their belongings. No signs of violence. No witnesses. No ransom demand. No bodies. The investigation eventually went cold. But one detail had always bothered him. The family had repeatedly reported being watched in the weeks before they disappeared. Back then, no one believed them. The detective looked around the room. Now we've heard the same story twice. Silence filled the conference room. A younger investigator quietly asked. How many other cases mentioned surveillance before the disappearances? The room fell quiet again. No one knew. For the next 3 weeks, detectives reviewed every unsolved family disappearance they could find. 38 cases. 26 of them contained reports of strange vehicles, anonymous phone calls, unknown people watching homes, or unexplained photographs. The similarities were impossible to dismiss. Someone, or perhaps several people, had been observing families long before they disappeared. Whether they were responsible remained unknown. Then forensic analysts made one final breakthrough. The mysterious symbol found in Michael's notebook had not been drawn by hand. Microscopic examination revealed tiny impressions beneath the ink. It had been copied from another document. Investigators searched everything recovered from the storage unit once more. Hidden inside the back cover of one notebook, they found an almost invisible pocket. Inside rested a folded piece of paper. On it was a single address. No name. No explanation. Just an abandoned farmhouse nearly 200 miles away. Police surrounded the property before sunrise. Every room was searched. The farmhouse had clearly been abandoned for years. Broken furniture. Collapsed ceilings. Dust everywhere. Nothing connected it to the Harper family. Until one officer noticed fresh scratches beneath an old dining table. The floorboards had recently been moved. Underneath was a narrow underground room. Detectives entered cautiously. Flashlights swept across damp concrete walls. The room was almost empty. There were no people. No furniture. Only several cardboard boxes. Inside them were hundreds of photographs. Families. Dozens of them. Some smiling during vacations. Others unloading groceries. Children walking home from school. The Harpers appeared in more than 40 photographs. The oldest had been taken nearly 5 years before they vanished. Someone had been watching them for a very long time. Pinned to one wall was a large map covered in colored pins. Many of the locations matched the disappearances Michael had been investigating. It was the strongest evidence yet that someone had deliberately tracked multiple families over many years. Yet there was one frustrating problem. The farmhouse contained no fingerprints. No DNA. No recent food. No clothing. Nothing identifying whoever had used it. It looked as though it had been abandoned only hours before police arrived. Outside, tire tracks led toward the nearby highway. Heavy rain the previous night had destroyed any chance of identifying the vehicle. Another opportunity had slipped away. Among the photographs, investigators found one final envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. It contained only one sentence. You were never looking for the right people. There was no signature. No explanation. The meaning has never been confirmed. Some investigators believed it suggested multiple offenders. Others argued it implied Michael himself had misunderstood what he was investigating. The debate continues to this day. Months turned into years. Searches continued. Fresh tips arrived almost every week. Most led nowhere. Occasionally, someone claimed to have seen Emma working in another country. Others insisted they had met Michael at a remote gas station. Each report was investigated. None could be verified. Gradually, the Harper family became one of the world's most famous unsolved missing family cases. Documentaries were produced. Books were written. Online communities analyzed every photograph, every witness statement, every second of surveillance footage. Even today, people continue discovering details that investigators overlooked. Some believe the mysterious observers were part of a sophisticated criminal organization. Others think Michael uncovered a secret that placed his family in danger. A few investigators still believe the Harpers willingly disappeared to protect someone else. None of those theories explain every piece of evidence. They don't explain the untouched dinner, the locked bedroom, the wiped drinking glass, the anonymous threats, the surveillance photographs, or the unknown DNA. Perhaps the most haunting question remains the simplest one. If someone had been watching the Harper family for years, why? Years after the investigation officially slowed, Detective Daniel Brooks returned to the Harper house one final time. The property had remained empty since the disappearance. Dust covered every room. The furniture sat exactly where investigators had left it. Daniel walked slowly through the silent home. He paused in the living room, the same place where the family's final known photograph had been taken. He looked toward the hallway mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw movement behind him. He turned immediately. Nothing. Just an empty room. When he looked back into the mirror, the reflection appeared perfectly normal. He dismissed it as exhaustion. Before leaving, Daniel locked the front door for what he believed would be the final time. As he reached his car, he instinctively looked back at the upstairs bedroom window. A curtain moved. There was no wind. Police later searched the house again. No one was inside. That incident never appeared in the official case report. Daniel mentioned it only once, years later, during a private interview after his retirement. He admitted he still couldn't explain what he had seen. Today, the Harper family's home still stands. Neighbors say the street never felt quite the same afterward. Some refuse to walk past the house after dark. Others insist they occasionally see lights flickering inside despite the electricity having been disconnected years ago. Authorities have never confirmed those reports. What they do confirm is this: 5 people vanished. No bodies have ever been found. No one has ever been charged. No definitive explanation has ever been established. The investigation remains officially open. Somewhere, the answers may still exist. Perhaps hidden in evidence that has already been collected. Perhaps in a witness who has not yet come forward. Or perhaps they disappeared along with the Harper family. Because sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are not the ones that end with an answer. They are the ones that leave behind only silence. Silence inside an untouched home. Silence around an empty dinner table. Silence in a family photograph where 5 smiling faces unknowingly captured the final ordinary moment of their lives. And somewhere, if the truth has survived, someone already knows exactly what happened that night. They simply have never told the world.